I don't know how people are still bearish on XRP or Ripple, but for those of you who are, maybe this right here will help, because you can see that Neuberger Specialty Finance has now partnered with Ripple Prime to bring a $200 million debt facility to Ripple Prime to help with institutional grade prime services as well as margin solutions. Now that might sound like a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo to you guys, but I'm going to sit here and break it down for you very simply so you can understand what exactly this means and why it's important, not just the deal itself, but the signal it's sending about Ripple, and of course, XRP being the underlying asset through everything Ripple does. Now, before we get into what's going on with this Neuberger deal, let's first understand what is Ripple Prime, because many of you probably don't remember exactly what they are and why they're important. So let's tie it all together, shall we? Ripple Prime was previously known as Hidden Road. Now, it was a prime brokerage service for institutions clearing up to $3 trillion in volume every single year. Now, this, of course, was before the takeover, and since then, they've tripled the size of their revenue, showing that Ripple Prime does have a significant amount of interest, not just because of who it was, but now because of who it is and what they offer. But Hidden Road and Ripple Prime are basically just a clearinghouse for transactions. So if I'm a big institution and I want to go to the market and make a trade, I would use Hidden Road for those transactions, whether both spot or margin. Now, I just want to be clear, it's not necessarily that all $3 trillion of volume are going to go under XRP at this point. It's a little bit more nuanced, but of course, Ripple has every incentive to draw people over into XRP, especially for any kind of cross-border payments that happen through that company. And can we just pause a minute and marvel at exactly what Ripple did here? Because instead of starting a prime brokerage from scratch, where they would have had to jump through hoops and hurdles to get licensing all around the world yet again, they just acquired a prime brokerage, specifically Hidden Road, which is one of the largest non-bank prime brokerages in the entire world. Okay, so what exactly does this deal mean? Well, Neuberger Specialty Finance, you can kind of think of in this situation like a bank, and Ripple Prime is the customer. Now, Ripple Prime has a credit card, let's say, and that credit card has a max spending limit, which we all are very familiar with our own credit cards. Well, in this scenario, what they're setting up is a $200 million limit. And of course, Ripple Prime is not going to spend that money on retail goods like we would or services. They're going to provide liquidity to their customers for interest, and at a higher interest level than what they're being charged by Neuberger. And in that way, they have up to $200 million they can spend giving liquidity to their customers, who then will pay them interest, which they will pay back to Neuberger. And of course, they will take some profit in between. Now, the key word here is that it's a limit. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to lend out $200 million at a time, but it just goes to show how institutional demand